Okay, so we've said that consumption is important. So what is it that determines it? And there are a variety of different factors that can affect consumption. There are loads and loads. And so, so what's going to, so as an individual, what's going to make you consume more? Having more income is likely to make you consume more. Interest rates, the cost of borrowing, the level of taxes, your wealth, your confidence. All of these things are going to have an impact on whether or not you want to consume. And then there are lots of other factors as well. It's kind of the level of exchange rates, for example, may determine whether you want to spend in the local economy or not. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some of these, so some of the more important ones one by one. Confidence will kind of drop out, and it's fairly obvious. So I'm going to take each of these four. I'm going to split it into mini videos. So what we're going to look at to start with is the link between kind of income, especially the link between GDP and consumption. Now, obviously, this is partly a two-way relationship. We said that if consumption goes up, GDP goes up. But what I'm interested in now is to say, well, suppose there is an increase in GDP, and therefore household incomes. What's going to happen to consumption? And the answer is pretty obviously, or you might think, it might go up. And this is a central part of Keynesian economics. Keynes says basically, that consumption depends on your current income. Consumption is derived from it. An increase in current income will lead directly to an increase in consumption. And we can say, so suppose we put income down there, and we put consumption here. If your income was zero, then obviously you're not just going to lie down in the road and die. You'll run down your savings. You'll borrow. So there will be some level of consumption. That's always going to take place. And this level of consumption here is called autonomous consumption. It doesn't depend on the level of income. So that's like really basic stuff, like paying your mortgage, paying your gas and electricity bills, buying food, and so on and so forth. But as your income starts to rise, obviously you'll start to consume more. And to start with, when your income rises from zero, what's going to happen is you're going to spend almost all of that income, because you're only just surviving. There's loads and loads of things that you're going to want. So a given increase in income will lead to a very similar increase in consumption. So we'll end up something like that. So at this stage, you have a very high marginal propensity to consume. But as your income grows, as income gets higher and higher, more and more you're likely to start putting money aside for your pension, to save, and so on, because your basic needs have been met. So what we'd expect to see is a consumption function that looks something like that. So that is a consumption function. Consumption is a function of income. And we're saying that at high income levels, there is a low marginal propensity to consume. If we give money to rich people, they're most likely just going to save it. If you give money to low income groups, because they still have many basic needs that haven't been met, they're most likely to spend that money. So you'll end up with a higher marginal propensity to consume. And this area is known as induced consumption. So that's consumption that is caused by changes in income. And that strikes me as kind of reasonably common sense. That you give people more money, they're likely to spend it, and that's been the rationale behind a lot of Keynesian economics, where in both the financial crisis and during the recent pandemic, governments have sent people checks, sent people money essentially through the post in the hope that they're going to spend it and that's going to support the economy. Now, some people say, well, the counter argument is that that's not necessarily as straightforward as you might think. So it's not really on the syllabus, but there are some alternative views, as to the link between income and consumption. So Friedman came up with something called the permanent income hypothesis, and he said, well, surely actually, we know, he said, that if you take an individual's life, so this is your age, and this is your income, we know perfectly well that when you're young, incomes are low, it's going to increase as you get promoted in your career, maybe it'll flatline for a bit, then it'll drop and you'll retire. And what Friedman's saying is, well, you don't want to be living on champagne in your 60s, and living on dirt in your 70s. He said that any rational and likewise, when you're young, it's kind of, well, do you really want to live in squalor? And what he's saying is, in reality, what's going to happen is that in these early years, people are likely to borrow. Here they're likely to save for their retirement, and here they do what's called dissave. They run down their savings. Or in your case, it's your parents spending your inheritance to go on holidays. So what he said is, really, a rational individual would simply say, well, what's the level of income that I can afford? I can afford to spend that level of consumption. Here I'm borrowing. Here initially I'm repaying that borrowing there. So if we call that area X, and that's area X. Here I'm saving, which is area Y, and here I use that Y to boost my consumption. And he's saying, therefore, if we have an increase in income that is expected, like that, then it'll have no impact on consumption. Because you already were expecting that. You know that you've got things to do with it. You've got a lifetime plan. Most of us, I don't think, are quite that rational. But on the other hand, it's clearly, there's clearly an element of truth in that. When I was, at a personal level, when I was young, I never gave a stuff about living within my means. I had many credit cards. Because I knew that I was going to get a decent job, and that that it would be quite straightforward to pay off that debt. It's like let's have fun. In my middle years, including now, I'm dumping large amounts of money into a pension. If somebody gives me more money, then I don't simply go out and spend it, because I've already got most of the stuff that I need. So I just dump it into some dull savings account somewhere. So there's an element of truth there. In reality, the truth probably lies somewhere in between. And as we said, probably a lot depends on your marginal propensity to consume. But anyway, the basic idea is that an increase in income is going to lead to an increase in consumption. You can evaluate it and discuss it using things like this, which, as I said, this one is Friedman's permanent income hypothesis. But as I say, it's not on your syllabus, but it's not going to do any harm to use it. Okay, I'm going to pause here, and then move on to the next factor in a separate video.